Okay, so when it comes to scaling up your hacking and security skills, automation is the key. And what easier way than to start by learning some of the tools already built right into your terminal. On top of that, they're built to be chained together to start you off in writing your own shell scripts. Basically, the better you are with command line tools, the faster you will be. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Netsec Explained, and in this video, we're going to be talking about hacking with Bash. So to kick us off, let's start with some core utilities. They are T, Grep, Cut, Sort, Uniq, Awk, and Xargs. At least these are the ones that we're going to go over today. If any of these are new to you, you should really think about adding them to your toolbox. Personally, I don't know where I'd be without them, and I use them on nearly every one of my assessments. So let's take a look at how these work. But first, we're going to need a target to work against. Normally, people will use something like Google or Yahoo, but I want to give you guys a real world example. So let's pick a bug bounty target. I already went ahead and found one on bugcrowd.com. In this case, it's HubSpot. And if we scroll down to the scope, we can see what's in scope is Hub API, HubSpot.com, HubSpot.net, HS sites, and HubSpot email. I'm going to keep things simple and stick with just HubSpot.com. So I'm going to pop over to my terminal. Now, one of the first things that we can do, this isn't usually something that you would do with a bug bounty target, but still something that you might do in a pen test or a security audit. And we're going to check the SSL settings, and I'm going to show you why. So I already have test SSL downloaded. So let me go ahead, hop over to test SSL, and I'm going to run test SSL against HubSpot.com. Now, if you're not familiar, test SSL just checks the different TLS SSL offerings on HTTPS sites. It also does some common checks for things like Heartbleed or Poodle or Lucky13. The reason why I'm running this is so that we can kind of get some output. Test SSL doesn't actually have a flag to let me write to a file, so I don't need the whole thing to run, but I'm going to Control C, just kind of cancel that. So say we want to be able to go through the output and just kind of take a look or maybe carve up the data in some way. So right now, since everything's printed out to standard output, my only option is to never close the terminal and never clear the screen. So let's add this to a file. Now, in typical shell fashion, we can do that with a simple greater than symbol in order to kind of point to a file. And in this case, let's just point to output ssl.txt. Awesome. So this is writing to the file, but I want to see what this information looks like as it's going through. So I'm going to Control C, cancel this. We can do less-r to keep the color settings and take a look at output ssl.txt. So sure enough, we can see that the output for test SSL had been written to a file, but we didn't get to see when it finished or how long it was going to take or where it was. So the first utility I'm going to show you is T. Now what T does is it lets us output information to standard output as well as write to a file at the same time. So to do that, what I'm going to do is test SSL, and instead of pointing that out to output ssl.txt, I'm going to pipe into TEE, and then I'm just going to put this as test output.txt, just so that, or I should call this actually T output.txt, just so that we know it's a T file. And go ahead, hit enter to run it, and we'll just let this spit some things out. So what this is doing is it's printing out to standard output so that we as users can actually see what's going on, but it's also logging all of this information into a file. And that's very useful if you want to record different types of information, like as it's coming through, especially for dynamic things such as test SSL. So I'm going to go ahead, cancel that, press Control C, and we can do less-r and do our t output.txt. And sure enough, we can see all of the information that it was showing us in standard output. So very handy little utility. Okay, next, let's go ahead and get some information from HubSpot. So one of the first things that we're going to want to do is get a list of the subdomains. We saw that we could do star.hubspot.com. So let me actually use sublister. I'm going to use the domain hubspot.com, and I'm going to output this to a file subdomains.txt. So we're going to let sublister run real quick. It's only going to take a moment. But this is going to get us quite a bit of data to work with so that we can play around with some of the other command line utilities and see how they work. There we go. And we can see our subdomains.txt. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to carve this up into a smaller list. So I'm going to cat subdomains. I'm going to pipe that into head, and I only want the top 10 subdomains. And just for fun, I'm going to point this through T and call this smalllist.txt. So here we go, and I can cat smalllist.txt, and there's the information. All right, so the next thing we want to do is probably get some IP addresses for these domain names. And in fact, I should remove that hubspot.com, just because I know this is going to cause some issues. The .hubspot.com is not an actual host, so that's going to cause some issues with the next series of things that we're going to do. So let's go ahead and get some IP addresses for each of these guys. To do this, we can actually start with, one of my favorite things is a for loop. So for domain, where domain is going to be our variable, and then we need information to be piped into here. The easiest way to do that is with this $ parentheses. So if you're not familiar, $ parentheses will let us run other bash commands so that when it's evaluated, it will pipe that information into the rest of the command. So in this case, let's just do cat smalllist.txt. And then we do a semicolon to kind of end the line. And by convention, we'll add do to the end to tell it to do the following actions within this for loop. So I just want to run the command host and then $domain, since that's the variable we specified. And let's cap it off with done. Awesome. So here's all of our output using just the simple host command. So now say we only want the IPv4 addresses. So we can see we have IPv4 addresses and we have IPv6. The key difference between these lines is IPv4 has the string has address, and the IPv6 addresses has IPv6 address. So to filter this out, what we can do is use a utility called Grep. And what Grep will let us do is actually filter output based on strings that are found in those lines. So in this case, we only want the lines that has address. So we can do the same thing, right? So for domain in $cat smalllist.txt, and that's going to fill out everything. So let's just go ahead, do host domain, and then I'm going to add grep, and I'm going to put this in quotes, has address, and then go ahead and run that. And here's all of our addresses. So we can do the same thing by just piping or appending this to a file. And in this case, I'll just call it IPv4 only.txt. And so now it's going to pipe all the information into this IPv4 only.txt file. Awesome. So the next thing that I'm going to do is we're going to want, you know what? Let's go ahead and try and slice this up. Let's see if we can say we deleted the small text or the small list.txt file, and we want the list of the subdomains again. Or maybe we only want their IP addresses, or maybe we want only the subdomains and the IP addresses in a CSV format. So to do that, we're going to use a couple utilities. The first one we're going to look at is actually called cut. So what cut does is it allows us to specify a delimiter. In this case, we'll probably use that as space, and then it'll take a single line and split it up into different sections based on that delimiter. So if I do cat IPv4 text only, cut, and then -d to specify my delimiter, and I'm only going to put a space in here. We can have a comma if it's a CSV, or we can have a pound if it's something else. It doesn't matter. It's any single character that we want to separate all the information. We can even have a period if we want to split up IP addresses. And then we want the first column, which will give us all of our subdomains. So that's going to be -f1. And here's all of our subdomains. And say we want all of the IP addresses. That's going to be our fourth column, because you can see we have separating by the spaces, we have the subdomain, we have the word has, we have the word address, and then we have the IP addresses. So in this case, it's going to be column 4, and here's all of our IP addresses. Awesome. Now, it looks like we have a few duplicate addresses in here. So see, we see 103.226, 103.226, but we also see 103.30 and 103.30. And say we want to only whittle it down to unique IP addresses. There's two more utilities that we're going to use next to each other, and that's going to be sort and unique. So they work hand in hand. What sort will do is actually sort the output alphabetically. So in this case, I'll just add in sort. And here is all of the IP addresses sorted alphabetically. To make it a little easier, we can do the same thing with the subdomains. And just to show you what that looks like without sort, here's our original subdomains. Now, if we only want the unique subdomains or the unique IP addresses, we'll use sort, and then we'll also pipe it into unique. And it'll give us only the unique subdomains. Or if we change this F1 to an F4, it will show us only the unique IP addresses. Now, something that's really important is that if you're going to use unique, you need to use sort first. The way that unique works is it looks for the next line to see if the next line is identical to the line that we're currently reading. If it's identical, then it skips. If it's different, then it will leave it there. To give you an idea, so here is our IP addresses. We have sort unique, and then if we just happen to swap the two, or even just use unique sort, we have a few more IP addresses. And they're duplicates. So we see 154.8.3, 154.8.3. And the reason is because in our original text file, some of these are duplicated. So the 103.226, they're right next to each other, but the 103.30 is not. So it's going to look at this 103.30 and it's going to say, hey, the next line is 103.226. It looks very different, so I'm going to leave it. It'll read this line. It'll see that the following line is identical, so it will delete that line, and then it'll look at the same one, 103.226, and it's going to take a look at the following line, see that it's different, and it's going to keep it. So here we can see the same thing, 154.8.3, 154.8.3, and then with the 155.8.3 and the 155.8.3, these are only going to whittle down to one address. So that's why we have a few duplicates in here. And if I only did unique, you can see that some of the addresses, even this 154.8.3, 154.8.3, they're on separate lines, not next to each other. So that's important to keep in mind. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is maybe we want to take our output and put it into a CSV format. So if I do cat ipv4.txt, here's what it looks like. So to put this into a CSV format, we're going to need to either pull the first and the last column out, or I should say string, substring, or we can completely replace the middle in between. So we're going to use a tool called sed to do a quick string replace. So here we can do cat IPv4 only.txt. We're going to pipe that into sed, and then we're going to use s to kind of show the separator. And in this case, we're going to use a /. We're going to take the string has address. We're going to use that / as our separator again, and then we're going to replace it with, let's say, a hyphen. And we'll use the separator to comment that, or to end the line, and then close the quote. And here is our subdomain and then IP address. Now, what's interesting is a lot of people don't think that they are used to seeing it with these /, but these / aren't always necessary. Instead, you're specifying the separator. So instead of /, say we have a domain or something like that we need to separate out, it's going to read these / as being part of the sed command instead of the string that it wants to replace. So instead, what we can do is replace our separator character with something else, maybe a pound. And I'm going to remove this html.com, and it'll do the same thing. So you get to specify what your separator character is. Cool. So the next thing is, what if we want to rearrange the format, right? So we already have subdomain and then IP address, and we just did a string replace to swap out the middle. But what if we want IP address and then subdomain? We need to move some things around a little differently. This is where a tool called awk comes into play. Awk is a very powerful utility. There's a lot that you can learn from it, or a lot that you can do with it, and there's been entire books written on just awk alone. But I'm going to show you the most basic usage that you'll usually use it for and that you'll usually see kind of out in the wild. So let's go ahead, cat IPv4, and then we're going to type in awk, AWK. The format's a little different, but it's not too bad once you get used to it. So in a single quote or in a double quote, print $1 is going to print the first comment, just like we did with cut F1. So this is going to print the first column separated by white space. So the first column, which is our subdomains, and then we can do the same thing, print 4 to print out only our IP addresses. Now, with this information, what we can do is print $1, and then we can actually add in a character, right? So in this case, we're going to need space hyphen space. So it's going to be print 1 hyphen and then print 4. And there we go, just like what we had with the sed command. We can also swap these, right? So now we have IP address and then subdomain. And so this just gives us a little bit more freedom and flexibility. And then say we want to add this into a CSV. So we just put a comma in there. And to make it just a little bit easier, I'm going to grep the comma just so that we can see that highlighting. Awesome. Okay, I have one more utility to show you, and that's going to be Xargs. So the reason I did a smaller list is because the host command can take a bit when going down one domain at a time. And with a for loop, that's exactly what it does, especially if it doesn't get a reply right away. So while pipes do give us what's called parallelization, the host command itself does not. So it's going to try the first domain, second domain, third domain. If it gets hung up anywhere, maybe it has a time to live or a timeout value, maybe it's a few seconds. It's going to take a little bit before it gets back to us, before it starts moving on to another one. So to take advantage of this parallelization, we're going to use Xargs. And Xargs lets us spawn a few different subprocesses in order to try a number of things all at once and then provide us the output as it comes back. So first I'm going to show you what it looks like as we do this regularly. So here's our for loop, just like last time, right? For domain in, and then we're going to do cat subdomains.txt do, and then our host domain. And I'm going to do the same thing. Grep has address just to point out the IPv4 addresses. And then I'm going to type done to close out the loop. So I'm going to run this. It hits a couple domains and then it pauses. And it's going to pause here for a while because there's a series of subdomains somewhere in this list that it still kind of gets hung up on. It doesn't receive the proper replies that it needs. And so there's a timeout value that we have to wait for. So as I'm talking, you can see it takes a little bit, and it's just, if you are trying this at home, it's going to stay here for a while. So to kind of keep things easy, I'm going to hit Control C. Actually, I can't use Control C. So the reason why I can't use Control C is because it's treating every single query with the host command in that for loop as an individual command. So pressing Control C isn't going to end to anything. It'll probably end the one command and then it goes to the next command and it's still hung up. So instead, I'm going to press Control Z or Control Z to pause the job. And you can even see with the jobs command what jobs are still there. And I'm just going to go ahead and kill it using kill%1. As you can see, the jobs there, this is the first job or job ID 1, and it's going to kill that. It's going to give us some information, and then I can type jobs in again, and the job is gone. So, Xargs. What we're going to do is cat the subdomains.txt. We're going to pipe it into Xargs. We're going to set capital P to 10. This is going to spawn 10 concurrent processes at the same time. We're going to do capital I, which is going to give our replacement character. In this case, by default, it's just these curly brackets. I'm just specifying the curly bracket so that the command knows exactly what to do. And then we get to type in our command. So in this case, I'm just going to do host and then curly brackets. And just like last time, I'm going to pipe this to grep has address. Cool. So I'm going to run that. It's going to get hung up in about the same spot, but after a couple more seconds, it's going to go ahead and push through. And the reason why it's able to do this using Xargs is because of that parallelization. We can even increase that capital P value to make it a little bit faster or try a few more processes at the same time. But the other great thing about Xargs is that the shell treats all of this as a single command. So if I run this and it gets hung up, I can press Control C and it's ended. I don't have to go through Control Z jobs and kill that way. So that's how you use some of these core utilities. Hopefully this is something that you are able to kind of take in stride and start using in some of your own engagements, whether or not you're doing bug bounty or pen test, maybe some security, maybe you're on the blue team, and even some CTFs. I started learning a lot of these commands while I was doing some CTFs. Well, that about wraps it up. This video topic was actually a request from comments on previous videos, so if you have another topic you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe to see more videos like this. I'll see you next time.